To the regular session of Findlay City Council on October 18th, 2022. We will start this evening's meeting with roll call followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Mr. Baumann?
Here.
Ms. Frischi?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer? Here. Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
And Mr. Wopser?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to accept the previous public hearing minutes and/or council minutes. Mr. Slough.
I would move the minutes be approved as circulated.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the city council minutes say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-ons, replacements, or removals from tonight's agenda?
We have a plethora. So we have a letter from Hancock Regional Planning Director Cordonier concerning a moratorium request, and that should be in the reports of municipal officers and municipal departments. We have another letter from Hancock Regional Planning Director Cordonier concerning zoning code amendments. That would also be in reports of municipal officers and municipal departments. Then we have an amended ordinance 2022-097, which is the real estate purchase agreement for the Remington estate, and we're going to move that legislation be amended. And then we have ordinance 2022-109, an amendment to that legislation to establishing that's the moratorium on new small box discount stores. And then we have new legislation 2022-119 about a moratorium for skill-based amusement businesses, and that is new legislation. So we would have two letters to be added, two legislations to be amended, and one legislation ordinance to be added, and that is all in the form of a motion.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those that approve tonight's changes say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. They are added, changed, whatever. Okay, we do have a proclamation. Mayor, will you please read that?
Good evening. It's my pleasure to present a proclamation recognizing Disability Employment Awareness Month. Each year, we celebrate this month in our community. Whereas on October 2022 marks the 77th anniversary of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And whereas the purpose of National Disability Employment Awareness Month is to educate about disability employment issues and celebrate the many and varied contributions of America's workers with disabilities. And whereas the history of National Disability Employment Awareness Month traces back to 1945 when Congress enacted a law declaring the first week in October each year National Employ the Physically Handicapped Week. In 1962, the word physically was removed to acknowledge the employment needs and contributions of individuals with all types of disabilities. In 1988, Congress expanded the week to a month and changed the name to National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And whereas workplaces welcoming of the talents of all people, including people with disabilities, are a critical part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and a strong economy. And whereas activities during this month will reinforce the value and talent people with disabilities add to our workplaces and communities and affirm Findlay, Ohio's commitment to an inclusive community that increases access and opportunities for all, including individuals with disabilities. Now, therefore, I, Christine M. Mern, Mayor of the City of Findlay, Ohio, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 as Disability Employment Awareness Month in Findlay, Ohio, and hereby recognize and commemorate the 77th anniversary of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and call upon employers, schools, and other community organizations in Findlay, Ohio to observe October with the appropriate programs and activities, and to advance its important message that people with disabilities add value and talent to our workplaces and communities, and encourage employers to take steps throughout the year to recruit, hire, retain, and advance individuals with disabilities, and work to pursue the goals of full participation, economic self-sufficiency, and independent living for people with disabilities. Please join me in recognizing and presenting this proclamation this evening to Nadine Weininger and Nick Longo from Blanchard Valley Center.
Thank you.
Congratulations for being here, and thank you for all that you guys do. I know Nadine works tirelessly to support individuals throughout our community, and Nick, you guys may recognize, has been here a couple of times. Not only does he get very involved in the community in various ways, but he also loves city council. I don't know why, but so he is not the people, the process. No, we appreciate you coming, getting involved in the community, and certainly the work that you guys are doing here tonight. So
Thank you very much, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. Are there any comments from council? Thank you again. We have no recognition or retirement resolutions, no petitions. We do have 3 oral communications. And this evening, we're going to start with Dan Romick. And Dan lives at 1009 South Main Street. And he wants to talk about the zoning change of West McPherson.
Is this on? It's a different microphone.
Push the button.
Thanks, Dennis.
There you go. Always trying to
Thank you, council, for having me today. My name is Dan Romick. Live just down the street from here on South Main, and today I'm representing our opinion as the South Main Street Neighborhood Association, our opinion in opposition to the zoning change on West McPherson, and what the potential businesses that would go are looking to go into that location. I shared on Thursday last week, if my days are right, it's been a blur, a list of many things which I know you can find if you were here. I thank council that were here and or tuning in online that you could hear that. I appreciate the commission for having me speak at that point. So I also wanted to reference, I'm coming in as one person at the commission meeting and also at this meeting today just to speak on behalf of our neighborhood, which is South Main from Lima Street to 6th Street / Lake Cascades Parkway. We have a very high pedestrian population, not only just in our local neighbors and all of our neighborhoods off of Main Street, but also many that are coming in just to take a stroll down South Main Street. And we feel that the proposed change would be make that dangerous intersection, actually intersections 6th Street and the McPherson intersection, even more dangerous. That concerns us quite a bit. Also with the log jams that we already see with traffic, we anticipate that we would see much more of a log jam, which not only just affects us as we take our kids to and from school, as kids are taking to and from school, whether that be Donnell, Jefferson, Chamberlain Hill, or it's even when I'm going to see my grandparents on Churchill. It's just that's a dangerous intersection. That's also a main thoroughfare for Hanco, and we think that should be taken into account. We already have a log jam there. I've seen Hanco ambulances have to weave in and out of traffic, and I just wanted to make sure that point was made. In addition to that, I did think it was interesting Thursday. I had the opportunity to speak, and again, thank you for that. After that, on my way home from volunteering out at the Boy Scout camp for Donnell Outdoor School, I came upon an accident actually at the West McPherson intersection. And I think that just speaks to what we're afraid of, not only for the pedestrians, but also for just traffic in general in that area. So as we just go through here, and we talk about things, we talked about the accident, we talked about the high pedestrian traffic. There's also many events that we like to host. I mentioned that I like to give out 1,500 pieces of candy at Trick or Treat. Actually, I was corrected. It's closer to 1,300. But so we have a lot of people in these events that come down. And we just think that just adds to the danger, not only with school drop-off, not only with that, but these things that I think make Findlay truly a gem. And I hope you consider that as we just talk about this discussion more and more. I have the opportunity to work in and outside of Findlay quite often, and when I say I'm from Findlay, you know, there's three things that's always mentioned: Wilson's Hamburgers, Dietz's Chocolate, and then that area with all those cool houses are on South Main Street. And what a gem we have, and a gem that we have the opportunity to protect. So I just thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I have 33 seconds. And I also just wanted to reference, this is my 4th time ever in chambers here, which I think is pretty cool. The first time was in middle school when I was going for my citizenship in the community merit badge. And I was at the council meeting when they actually decided to name Romick Parkway. And I didn't know the mayor. I wish I did, but that was pretty cool. So thank you for having me.
Are there any
I was also going to ask too, so we can communicate back, while I have 6 seconds, 3 seconds, what the next steps would be in this process, so we can, again, communicate that back to our neighbors.
We'll make sure you know what those are. Mr. Russell?
Well, Dan, thanks for coming in, and it obviously, that Boy Scout training proved very good. So I'm glad you are putting the Citizens in the Nation badge to use. And next steps, just so everybody is aware, that the next planning and zoning meeting is going to be, make sure I got this right, November 10th at noon here in council chambers. We will once again live stream that meeting. And once again, it'll be an opportunity for yourself and your neighbors to come and speak. And it gives the applicant an opportunity to respond to some of the things that they heard at the last meeting. And lastly, I was not here. I happened to be watching the YouTube from Colorado last Thursday, and I just compliment you and your neighbors and the folks from Sherman Park and really everybody that spoke on the respectful nature of the conversations and the comments, and the fact that I think that's the way democracy should work, and that's how it should look. And I was really proud of how Findlay just is having this discussion. And so to your neighbors and to yourself too especially, thank you very much. But November 10th, noon, Planning and Zoning Committee, and yes, we will be live streaming again.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one off or on? Just leave it
You
on.
leave it on.
Okay.
Our second speaker tonight is going to be Jack Raymond. Jack, where are you? And he lives at 1330 South Main, and he'd also like to talk about the topic at hand.
1330's closer to the issue. We live just one house between us and where this new event would occur. I'd like to begin my remark quickly with the traffic issue. We had one mention of an accident. The next day, just around noon, there was another accident at McPherson and Main. And then in the evening, there was an accident down 6th Street just beyond Kroger. I would point those out because we are so intimately now talking about what happens to a loaded traffic zone, and talking about adding to it simply makes it realistic to say we're entering a place where danger becomes the nature of those two intersections. That's the one issue. The other is to represent those people who are in that 250-foot zone who got notified that this was to occur. We have a vested interest beyond the issue of it's South Main Street and it's a wonderful, wonderful place. Our issue is try to sell a house next to a McDonald's. And several of us have rather nice houses in that immediate area. So I would simply ask the council to consider that there is a financial investment on the side in opposition to having the McDonald's established as an issue there. Finally, I would say I appreciated the zoning commission looking at not rezoning the R1 property because several years ago, we rezoned a property for Speedway. We now have 2 vacant houses, one of which has sat there now for at least 8 years without a tenant, and the other that is now on its 3rd year without a tenant. Those houses are going to ruin the utilities have been turned off. Well, we're talking about a brand-new McDonald's, so, well, they won't turn the utilities off there. Be careful about the logic of that. 8 years passes, and now Marathon doesn't own that property. 8 years can pass, and a whole lot of things can happen. Main Street South has been there now in its present condition, give or take, its development over a short period of time, for 120 years. If you want to change something that might have an 8-year horizon, it doesn't fit into the time that has already occurred to create a really wonderful South Main Street. So I appreciate your attention, and I speak in opposition ultimately to placing a McDonald's at that location. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. Our third is Tony Coyne, who resides at 1100 Lakeside Avenue, and he'd like to speak to the subject also.
Thank you, Mr. Council President and members of council. If I could approach, I want to pass out a few zoning maps. I'll pause while you're okay. Thank you, sir. So briefly, I just wanted to note that we appreciate the Committee of Council's tabling this matter going forward. We had wanted to focus on the fact that the rezoning that's being discussed involves a 38.5-foot wide parcel. 38.5-foot wide parcel. The issue of McDonald's and the site development, we're not there yet. That's not before the Planning Commission, and it's not before Council. What I passed out just as something I thought would be helpful. If you look on that map, you will see the pink location on the southwest corner of McPherson and Maine. That's the site that's currently Zone C1, which could accommodate banks, restaurants, retail facilities, bakeries, bookstores, coffee shops, convenience stores, dry cleaners. That zoning's already there. That's in place there. So that's not, we could shoehorn something in like a McDonald's, but we don't want to do that. So we looked at making this site appropriate in size, which is rezoning the 38.5-foot wide parcel next door. Now, there's a 15-foot alley to be vacated as well. That was approved, and we still recommend that. I'm just speaking to have the rezoning issue kept on the table so that we could think about it thoughtfully and address some of the good questions that were raised by the community at the meeting. But we're not going to do that, on the spur of the moment, particularly when you talk about important issues like traffic. That's very important when you consider rezoning. But there were comments about commercial creep into the residential. And I thought it was just important to point out, if you look at the properties to the west of this site, we've highlighted a couple in red that are not being used per R1 zoning. They're being used for commercial, and I would say even possibly light industrial uses. So you've got the red parcel next to Douglas is not being used just for residential. It's got other activity on it. The one that's on McPherson, again, south side on west, that also is not being used for residential purposes. The blue parcel, the largest acreage vacant parcel, is zoned for commercial office. The red parcel next to that is a fairly large electric substation, which is not used for residential. And the church, which is a conditionally permitted, not permitted use in residential, is also in that location. And then you get into the Cooper Tire facility. So if you look at the raw acreage or square footage from the subject property to the west, the vast majority of it is not used solely for R1 residential. It's other uses. And our view is to look at this parcel prudently, thoughtfully, to see if the rezoning makes sense. And then we could talk about the other issues with site plan if it makes sense. We don't want to push this on the community, but we want to have a thoughtful discussion, and we hope to do that at the November 10th meeting. So I'm really here just to thank the Committee of Council for tabling the matter so that we could give a thoughtful discussion to this property. With me tonight is Sharon Sills. She's just here. She's a construction manager for McDonald's, but also Larry Ball, who's the local operator for McDonald's. And I can't emphasize enough, McDonald's is a national reputation, but it's a local operation. And you have a very good local operator who will operate this particular restaurant. It's a couple of $1 million investment, 65 jobs, and it truly is an organization I've been proud to represent for nearly 40 years. So I just thank you for your time, and I just want to thank you to keep the matter on the table, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Coyne? Mr. Russell?
Really just a comment, and there was some discussion on Thursday concerning McDonald's and concerning the Ball family, not the Ball family specifically, but I know Larry. And I think my sons were in Boy Scouts with Larry. I know Larry is a big supporter of the Boy Scouts, hence part of the reason that I complimented Mr. Romick on his citizen in the community merit badge. But the Ball family is wonderful. They're a strong supporter of Findlay. I'm very happy that they're in our community. They've been doing McDonald's restaurants for decades, and I think they're outstanding operators. And as a person who observed this meeting on YouTube, I just wanted to really make that statement to let my opinion know that I really respect Larry and what he and his family have done with their years of McDonald's involvement. I'm glad they're here in the community, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I really feel the same about McDonald's and the Ronald McDonald House. I know that when my son was born, that was looked prematurely. The Ronald McDonald House was looked at as an option. I think my sister actually stayed at that facility in Denver, and there's a lot of things that the corporation does that I personally very much appreciate, and I appreciate you bringing that up tonight too, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Coyne.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, written communications.
An email received from Timothy Maggie on October 4th regarding the proposed zoning variance for West McPherson Avenue, Lake Cascades Parkway area.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
An email received from Chloe Taskoff on October 11th regarding dangerous animals.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
An email received from an Amber Wilson on October 12th regarding rezoning issue, Thursday's October 13th meeting.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
And an email from Jessica Grosso on October 13th regarding opposition to the rezoning of 119 West McPherson and McDonald's Restaurant.
Questions or comments? Letter to, Mr. Russell? Sorry, letter to be filed. Reports of municipal officers. Go ahead, Mr. Russell.
Now,
I was going to dismiss these.
yeah.
Everybody, I want you to know, from now on, the regular business of city council is going to happen. None of it has anything to do that I can see that concerns this evening's issue. You're welcome to stay. I can't get you a merit badge from the Boy Scouts. At one point in time, I probably could have done that because I worked for them. But if you want, I give us, how about 5 minutes, and we'll let everybody leave that wants to. I just want, this is a comment for me personally. I grew up on South Main. Obviously, it's been a while since I've lived there. I understand, that area as probably as well as anybody. I have two sisters that live on South Main also. But I also am a businessman, right? So understand that too. But also, I think we live in a country, a state, and a city that allows constructive criticism and in a civil manner. And I appreciate everybody coming tonight. I'm sure there's probably some emotions that are maybe not said, but again, we will work through this. Can't say everybody's going to be happy, but again, that's what city council does, right? That's what you elect us to do, and that's what we're going to do. Okay. So how about we take a 5-minute adjournment? Does that sound good? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Beach, can I get you to close that door for me? Certainly, sir. Let's continue. Let's see, where are we? We are on reports of municipal officers and departments.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for September 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Police Departmental Activities Report for September 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for September 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department Activities Report for September 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Precipitation and Reservoir Levels Report for third quarter from July to September 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
A letter from, wait, I lost my place. Okay, sorry about that. Summary financial reports year-to-date for September 30th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Planning Commission minutes for September 8th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Calb regarding traffic fabrication shop, project number 319-12500.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Police Chief Ring regarding seized drug trafficking funds.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Treasurer's reconciliation report for September 30th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Calb regarding Strict Center CDBG grant funds appropriation, project number 3199490.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Calb regarding reimbursement funds from OVO, or OVO? I don't know how you say it.
OVIVO. So let's call it OVO. Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Parks and Recreation Board minutes of August 15th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Traffic Commission minutes for August 15th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
Letter from Findlay Municipal Court Administrative and Presiding Judge Bishop regarding clerk of court salary increase.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobson.
I guess I'm not sure who this should be directed to. My concern with this, and I understand what you're doing, and Mr. Beach, number one, congratulations on your long career, and sorry to see you go. I appreciate the judges saving us some money, I suspect, maybe. My concern is what happens with this salary. We're raising the salary to take over some of the duties that you will vacate. But what happens if the judges in a year or 2 years from now decide to reinstate your position? What happens with Ms. Edgel and her salary?
Thank you, sir.
Mike's on. Thank you.
It sounds like it, and I can't hear very well. Sir, we are going to, they, I guess, now, strange to say that, discuss this at length. With the administrative team that's in place right now, very strong leadership capabilities in Heather Eigel, Candace Griffith, and Brad Beige, amongst whom my duties are going to be disseminated, along with the administrative judge is going to pick up some extra functionality that they're not used to. What would occur is we're keeping the Director of Court Services job description active in the handbook. Should it need to be reinstated, should one of those three leave or meet with some unfortunate circumstance, that can be reinstated. Now, as to what would happen to Clerk Eigel's compensation package, I guess that would have to be addressed at the time. I could see where if the duties were removed at some place, the pragmatist to me says, well, the compensation should be reduced at the same level. However, realistically, I wouldn't want somebody to take something that had been granted to me away. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying to be determined.
Yeah, I guess that's my concern overall, and hopefully that wouldn't happen. I hate to see anybody taking money out of their salary. That would be terrible. But at the same time, I guess, I don't know what we should do with that. It was just a question that I had, and I guess maybe we'll just have to deal with it when we get there.
May I comment further, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay. I will tell you that specifically Ms. Eichel has been recruited by various court case management computer firms trying to lure her away from us. Part of her capabilities are that she is, I think her degree is in computer science, if you will. She integrates with our software, our case management software provider in a way that none of the rest of us could on that floor. So she is actually fulfilling more than one function currently, and she does it seamlessly.
Very good. I guess that's all my questions, Mr. Beach. Thank you very much, and again,
Mr.
congratulations.
Stashek.
probably help alleviate some of the concern in the sense that this is not a change to the salary ordinance per se. The way the ordinance is structured, it is mandated that this particular position be in there in a certain way, but it's just strictly a raise. It's not a shift or change to the ordinance in a sense where you're actually moving those funds within the language of the ordinance. So it's discretionary to the judges. However, you do have the piece in place that says we cannot pay more than 8% in 1 year. So to that sense, we're not compromising the ordinance or changing the ordinance in any way, and I think that should give you some comfort with that thought.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Assistant City Engineer Roush regarding Strict Center.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
I guess, is Lee here, or Jeremy, you're going to answer questions on this? I've got a couple of questions on the Strict Center from this. We're at the phase now, or the guaranteed maximum price phase, and have we gotten a guaranteed price, or have we got a budget from them at this point in time?
For the total project, you're saying, so right now we have it split up in the phases, and we phase that out for the scheduling purposes and kind of how, with the materials, what we're needing to purchase. So the building, with the price of steel, we wanted to secure that. So that's why we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We're going to have 2 more, which would be a phase 4, which is the interior fixtures, and then phase 5 is exterior pavement. But that kind of coincides with the one that was passed through, that was the CDBG project, or that was with the Strict Center that had the burn building. The burn building is pretty much all outside. That has a lot of the pavement within there. So we really, we had that pulled out, the exterior pavement, because we don't want to get muddied into what was set aside for the CDBG project and what is set aside for the Strict Center. So that's kind of explanation why we have the different ones pulled out, exterior concrete stuff, because it can be paid or funded through different funds, what we were originally planned for. So we're working through kind of the final GMP4, which is that HVAC and interior fixtures package, which will be coming. We're currently working that. We should be seeing that within the next week or so, which will be kind of our total build. We are cautious of the budget, what we have in mind. We know, or what we have was the donated money, what the city already vouched for it. So we had that in mind. We are working with the contractor and also, well, they're the design builders too, on ways if we have to, if we're so far over budget or under budget, whatever, that we can alleviate some of that by making some simple changes in there that can make some cost savings. So we don't have a fully overall yet. But we are cautious of what our budget is, and we are working to make sure we can stay within those realms.
Okay, so you're asking us to do what with this legislation then?
So this one tonight, this one that you addressed on, so this can go through, but this will allow us to enter into the GMP3 with the contractor, with the design build contractor. We've already have approval for the GMP1. So that's the site work, getting the site ready. GMP2 is pretty much the steel building, erecting the steel building, getting that under shell. GMP3, which is the one that we're talking about, that is for all the interior concrete that is needed, mezzanine. There are some block walls, so masonry work, all that kind of stuff. So we would pretty much have a fully full building what we're expecting, but we won't have the full HVAC. There's not going to be much HVAC because there is going to be some, but it's not going to be a full cooled system or warm system or anything like that. But it will also have the small fixtures on there. So there will be a price with that. I don't have a good idea what it is yet. We're working through that, but like I said, we know what our budget is with that, and we're going to, if we have to make cuts somewhere or change some or come back to you guys to let you know what we are needing, we're prepared to do so.
But the Klaus has not provided that number yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Are they not required to do that prior to signing this agreement?
No, because since we split these out, since we split them out as partial GMPs.
Understood, but don't they have to give us a GMP for, what is this, phase 2?
We do. We do. It was, I I
or
didn't bring the
phase 3,
paper.
whatever it is you're asking us to approve tonight, you want to sign an agreement to go forward. And I just want to make sure we know what we're signing, I guess.
Yes, we do have the amounts in there.
Okay,
365
that's
for
365.
GMP3, and I think GMP2 was 2 something.
Okay. Then my last question on this was, I believe in this type of contract, those numbers or this was required to be bid out competitively. Were they bid out?
We did that as a RFQ, design build.
But that was just to get the
Right, they
contractor.
do not have to, once we have a design build contractor through the RFQ process, and then we went through a proposal process, interview, kind of all the way down through there.
Understood.
They do not have to send that out as a public bid. They do have to go out for bids, and we have records of those, but the city can't go say, hey, go to talk to this person, we want a bid from them. It's their responsibility to go out. They have to get at least 3 of them, and if they want to self-perform, they have to submit a price as well for
Okay.
all that.
So
But-
so let me understand, thank you,
Yep.
Jeremy. And then, so that was done.
Correct.
So they selected 2 other, how many other contractors? Bid on
Right
this
now, they
process.
have, the site contractor is being performed by All Demolition, and then they are self-performing the GMP2, and then GMP3, they are self-performing 2 of the tasks.
So they bid this out to 3 other contractors and themselves,
Correct,
and they submitted a bid,
correct.
and they won.
They were the lowest, but we do not have to select the lowest one. They were the lowest, but we do not have to select the lowest one because it was not, even with competitive bids, we don't have to. So that's kind of with the Brickler and Eckler stuff, we are making sure that we are following to a T on that because this is not a new process in Ohio or, the US, but it is a newer one for us. So we want to make sure going forwards, we're going to see this from, we're going to keep seeing this. We want to make sure we have a baseline to go off of. So we have vetted everything through them. We have vetted and look at ORCs and stuff, what is needed, and we are following within that.
And I guess a question on the whole process then, Jeremy, and thank you for all that information, by the way. So they can just choose whatever contractors they want to bid this
They can.
against them?
Yeah, they can choose who they want.
And it doesn't have to be made a public bid?
No, it does not.
Does that ensure that we're getting the best price in that type of scenario? I mean, I would have my brother bid it.
But then,
Somebody else.
that's kind of, if you're going to go out for a public bid, then we would break it up in ourselves into a public bid, and then just go
Right.
each package. But the reason why we went through the design build process, is because this is a specialized thing. There are a lot of things, I'll even admit, I'm an engineer, there's a lot of things contractors can see out there that I don't see every day. They know what the culture or the environment is out there, what's available. We could spec it out as an 18-foot building, and they could come to us and say, hey, actually, I can get you a 20-foot, and it's going to cost you $5,000 more, it's going to cost you $5,000 less, because that's what's readily available out there. So we wanted to pull a contractor in to get their ideas, get their insights on that, as well with an architect, so that way we can all work together to make sure that we're utilizing our donation funds and stuff as much, utilizing as much as possible, and still getting in the long run, because the environment right now, with inflation and stuff, we want to make sure we're getting the best price.
Very good. So we're still on budget for the overall project and however many phases you've broken this up into so far.
As many phases as we have in there, but we are cautious of the budget, and we are keeping an eye on that and make sure that if there's stuff that needs to be changed or pushed, or we need to approach you guys, we are prepared for that.
Very good.
Thank you for your intensive questioning and updated from our, yes, Ms. Frischie.
Jeremy, before you sit down, I've never seen a process like this, and you say it's done across the country. What's the benefit? This seems very, a lot of legal fees have been paid out, there's been a lot going on, there's a lot of phases, I'm not used, what's the benefit to doing it this way compared to the way that we usually do larger projects like this?
So with the design build, everyone has a piece of the pie. The contractor has a piece of the pie, the architect, and the city. If we would set it up as just pretty much we send it out as a public bid, so buildings, that's not my specialization. fully roadways, pipes and all that kind of stuff, we can easily get down to you're running straight, each linear foot with that. It's a, you know, it's a to B type thing. So we can bid that out as a public bid, because that's something we can take care of. This is a design build where, so not to change real quick, so the city is taking liability on that. So if you were the contractor and you won the bid, and we had in our specs for something, or the way we had it built, and you came to us, say, I can't build it that way, or it's not built, you can send me a change order, because that is outside the work of what you bid. So that's, you know, we could be potentially in the long run with bid out projects such as water line stuff, where you could have change orders because that's what you spec. So design build process is everyone has a piece of pie. If they come to us later, if the contractor comes to us later, say, oh, well, you know, I can't build it that way, you know, we can say, there's no change orders. You guys understood going into this. We made sure that when we went into it, everyone knew what we were building. We got the best possible building out there, or best possible product out there, because we all worked together to make sure what our needs were, what is capable out there. They understood what is out there. And then also that in the same way, we can have cost savings things. So we can have a building this size and then come to us and say, you know, it's roughly this price. We're like, well, what if we do this? Can we do this? You know, what do you guys think would be a cost saving? Would making a square instead of rectangle, is that going to save us money? Because we're getting the same footage. So it's another approach that pretty much, like I said, everyone has a piece of the pie. Everyone has liability with on that project, that you can't come back and say a change order claim or anything like that.
This street department project is gonna be similar then?
It's, yes, because that's another one where we know what we want to fit in there, but then kind of the realm with that is what's the capability of being built. Looking at the footer design, looking at the wall design, looking at, they also go into permitting, ADA stuff. They got to look, I brought that one, but they look at code, building code and stuff, where, yeah, our street guys could go out there and probably build that, but they're going to build what they build at their house. They don't know all the Ohio building codes, all the Wood County codes, where the contractor's taking responsibility of all that. If we did it as a bid process, the city would have to go that and make sure they're following the route. But this is where the contractor's putting it on their shoulders as much as all of us to make sure we're getting a turnkey operation at the end.
Mr. Russell?
Thanks for the explanations, Jeremy. I need to hear one thing another time so I can get it through my head. The CDBG grant is going to be used for the burn building.
Just the burn building.
And then you've separated that out, and is that, so that is going to be a separate GMP?
With
So how, you separate, it's like a
yeah, because
separate-
that would be a separate part of the project. So through the RFQ process, when we were selecting that, we said that there could be an add-on of that for them to have the burn building as part of that. So, you know, that was upfront with everyone. Since this is a CDBG project, we need, you know, even more than what we are now, we need to make sure our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted for that. So it's going to go out probably as a, they're going to go out for 3 contractors or 3 vendors for that, but that will be an add-on, which would be a GMP, but it's not going to be for, it's under the Strict Center, but it's a separate project and separate funding source, but it's still underneath the same contractor.
And so Klaus will be going out for the 3 bids?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And that's what.
We haven't seen that bid results come back. Tonight we've simply gotten CDBG money that we can
utilize for
utilize.
it. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, because we have a lot of the site stuff in it. They're one big site, but they're separate projects within themselves.
Understood, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Hellman?
I mean, if I can, real quick, to move beyond the bidding thing and taking it into the operations of this Strict Center, and I spoke earlier with the mayor about it and believe and trust everything that she said, but mainly just to have it on public record, has to do with the maintenance and operations of this Strict Center. That's been built into a budget going 5 years out, and that's going to be taken care of, the maintenance and operations of the facility.
Yes, yeah, I mean, Mayor, if you want.
We're just trusting Jeremy to get it built. We have to run it. So I know
Well, I trust what you told me.
Chief Everly wasn't able to be here, but if you recall, actually at the meeting that we discussed, one of the initial funding from council to go towards this, we presented a pro forma that showed the operations and maintenance plan, as well as some of the revenue opportunities that would be minimal, but help cover our costs, right? So some of the programs that we would bring in, training, anyone that would be utilizing the facility outside of us would be responsible for covering their costs, both of bringing in any trainer and then kind of wear and tear on the building and facilities when they are utilizing it. So yes, we have built that. We understand that there, will be some cost in our budget, but long-term, we will absorb that and believe it to still be appropriate.
Are there any other questions concerning the letter that was presented in the agenda? If not, letter will be filed.
Letter from Hancock Regional Planning Commission Director Cordonier regarding moratorium request. That's an add-on.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Hancock Regional Planning Commission Director Cordonier regarding zoning code amendment.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
That's it for that part.
Committee reports.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Anthony Coyne, Diane Culta, attorneys for the applicant Epic Collaborations LLC, to rezone 119 West McPherson Avenue from R2 medium lot residential to C1 local commercial. We recommend to table the request.
Real quick, there says that there were all the signatures then eventually? Okay, thank you.
I now have it.
And can you report what that vote was?
It's up at my desk.
Does anybody know what that vote was? Was it unanimous? Mr. Baumann?
It was 3-1 with me voting in the dissent.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wobster?
I understand that Chairman Russell was not at this meeting. I guess I'm looking for one of the other people that voted in favor of tabling this as to their reasoning for doing that.
If I may, I guess,
Mr. Hellman?
thank you. My thought was, we seem to have gotten bogged down in the fact that this was gonna be a McDonald's. I mean, I'm not in favor of a McDonald's for, many of the reasons, all the reasons that were explained here. However, the request to us had to do with the zoning and the vacation of the alleyway, and I'm not too certain that you can predicate turning the zoning down based on what the use was gonna be. So I wanted to get a clarification on that, and thought it was best that we not make the decision on a McDonald's. I mean, the applicant could change their mind and put a Dietz's in there and a religious store or something, and it would be A-OK. So thus the reason for wanting to ferret this out a little bit more.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Nope.
And-
Hey,
and
just
any
wanted
other-
an explanation. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Wobster?
I'll make a motion to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Committee report is adopted.
The Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Anthony Coyne, Diane Culta, attorneys for the applicant Manzoor Gavin LPA, to vacate a 15-foot alley between West McPherson Avenue and Lake Cascades Parkway, formerly Vance Avenue, east of Douglas Parkway, abutting Sherman Addition, Block G, and in lots number 16815 through 16822. We recommend to approve as presented.
Again, can we put the voting record on the record? Thank Mr. Baumann.
It was again 3-1 with my being the lone dissent.
Thank you. I need a motion. Mr. Hellman?
You looking for a motion to accept the committee report?
Yes.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request to discuss a 6-month moratorium on the establishment of any new small box retail stores and skill-based amusement businesses via ordinance 2022-109. We recommend that the moratorium be split with a separate ordinance for each small box retail and games of skill establishment. We recommend approval of the moratorium for games of skill establishment. Motion made by Councilman Hellman, seconded by Councilman Slough. All were in favor. We recommend approval for the small box retail moratorium. Motion made by Councilman Hellman, seconded by Councilman Slough. Ayes were Bauman, Hellman, Slough, nay was Frishy. And that's it.
Mr. Hellman.
Are you looking for an approval of the
I
committee?
always am.
I didn't know for sure.
Was
So
that a
moved.
motion?
Move to accept the committee report.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Bauman. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom is referred a request to discuss amendments to the Findlay zoning code, dollar thrift stores, skill-based gaming via ordinance 2022-110. We recommend to approve as presented.
Again, this, once all signatures are obtained, Mr. Bauman, do you know what the vote was at that time?
That was the same as previous 3-1 with Ms. Friggy voting in the dissent.
Thank you. Mr. Wobser.
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Bauman. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted. Legislation. We will start with resolutions.
First reading for Resolution 2022, a resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Slapp.
I would move for adoption of Resolution 29-2022.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
What is WEX Inc.? It says amounts over super blanket PO. I don't know. Anybody can answer what WEX Inc. is for me? Or what department?
Right Express.
What?
Right Express. Right Express, it's the fuel.
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 Okay.
Just fuel for city vehicles, the airport? No, not just the airport, citywide. Yeah, it's a, WEX has a credit card.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-97 as amended. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a real estate purchase agreement with Remington Arms for the purchase of properties located on Bank Street and East Hobart Street, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slapp.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2022-097.
As amended.
As amended. Please state as amended.
As amended.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
What was amended in it? Was it just a date or something?
So the seller came back to us and said they wouldn't cover our closing costs. That's not expected to be very much. So there's two changes that we made. One, we increased the dollar amount to $91,000 to cover the any of the closing costs, and two, we added the appropriation directly into it, which was at the recommendation of the deputy auditor, just for ease of paperwork.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
For third reading as ordinance 2022-98, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobson.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, everybody. Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-103. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a guaranteed maximum price phase amendment number 2, GMP 2, with Klaus Construction Corporation for the procurement and erection of the building for the Strick Center project, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Jeremy, in your email, there was a desire to get moving on this GMP2, on this legislation. Can you give me some idea as to the urgency or how this stacks up in the project?
This is the building, so it's pretty time sensitive. I mean, any more we wait with the building, the price could go up on that, on Klaus's or ourselves, I guess. But we're wanting to get that secured, one, schedule, and two, price with that.
But haven't they already given us, so they give a maximum price but then try to do it for less? Is that how?
So we have partial GMPs for the whole project. So we have the part for each kind of component of what it is. So this GMP2 that we're talking about is for the building itself and the erection of it. So the sooner we can order is, one, make sure we can stay on the schedule that they've discussed with their supplier, and also make sure we can keep that price that's going with it. But with the timing of that, make sure we can keep going with, our, I think it was June 23rd or something, like say early summer completion date. We decided to break it up on that, so that way we can get, the building ordered within a timely manner, so that way we can get that secured. The site work was a time thing because of when it came down to, so it's just how things, it's not how we would want to if, on every project, but for this one, how to make sure we stay on schedule and stay within the build timing, we decided to go into the partial ones.
Mr. Wobser.
So Jeremy, you're saying that the price on this could actually go up?
With
you're telling me
anything, they have it,
price could go up.
I probably misspoke on that. They have it secured in. It would be probably, if the price did go up on that, would be Klaus's, because it would be their responsibility to cover. We probably wouldn't cover it, but we want to be good stewards to everyone. If we can help them along, make sure that they don't have a price increase unexpected because of a schedule or something like that, it will be theirs to cover. But and also with that, more than the price is the timing. If we miss a window when they're going to make this building, it could be pushing us out a little bit farther. It could push us out another 2 months.
I understand your question, the comments about the timing, but what about if right now steel prices have actually been dropping over the last 60 days? Are we going to get a price decrease if the price is less to Klaus?
With the GMP, I would have to see what with the
Well, I don't
legality.
understand
But
then, Jeremy, if you're willing to give them a price increase.
so I misspoke on that. So it would be theirs on that. I'm just used to normal projects if there's price increase on something. So this would be theirs to eat. So if it does go up on that, it's being a good steward, make sure we can get that purchase of what their supplier, which is Butler Building, made sure they said we can give it to you at this cost.
Okay.
So if it goes up, they would have to either, or they fight out with their supplier.
Thank you.
Ms. Frishy.
So I just had like a whoa Nelly moment on that statement. So when they give us a price, is it locked for 30 days? Is it locked for 45 days? What is the urgency to suspend rules to get this done? Is that
Take costs totally out of it, because we're not going to see it. It's going to be scheduled. My main concern would be schedule, so that way we can secure the building, make sure that we're building when it's snowing out, when it's cold out, because you can do that kind of stuff.
It's convenience to you, but it's not changing our price.
It's not changing our price, but yeah, it is convenience on when we had this project completed. Instead of a middle of June or whatever, like I said, summer, it could turn into a fall. Who knows?
Okay.
Hearing no, sorry, Mr. Russell.
Throughout this year, we have, with inflation raging, we have worked with our contractors to get projects that we had through our capital plan going, so that they could take advantage of pricing in and ensure that they could get good prices, and then in turn, the same for us. And it was kind of done as a out of respect, and we're trying to help the working relationship with our vendors. And while the price here is guaranteed, the desire to stay on schedule and work collaboratively with our vendor, in this case Klaus, and work on a project that has received really countywide praise. I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. The motion is to suspend the rules, I'm sorry. And suspend the rules. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Nay.
Sorry. Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-103.
Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2022-103.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-104, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-105, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-106, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-108, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-109 as amended.
Mr. Baumann.
Yeah, Matt, you and I have kind of talked about this issue at length, and I just kind of wanted to, if you could offer a little bit of explanation on why the split here.
Sure. So the moratorium was, I requested it at the last city planning commission, or, city council meeting, October 4th. Council debated whether to pass it on an emergency basis, waive the 3 readings and pass it on an emergency basis. Ultimately, city council requested that it go to city planning commission and the planning and zoning committee. Both of those entities considered it on October 13th. While they considered it, they provided feedback. One of the feedback was they wanted the ordinance split in 2. Some people saw more urgency in the games of skill versus the small box retail. So by splitting it in 2, you could vote for a moratorium on one and not the other. And then additionally, there were some concerns about the permanent change to the ordinance. And one of the things that I did was, I guess, sharpen the definition of what a small box retail is. I looked at other communities. So in your packet, you have amendments to the proposed change. Rather than referring it to as small box retail, we refer to it as small box discount store. And then we added to the language of the definition, small box discount stores do not include retail stores that contain a prescription pharmacy, sell gasoline or diesel fuel, primarily sell specialty items, or a specific type of product. So that's on the zoning amendment. That's item 110. The actual zoning amendment, I'm requesting that go through its full normal process. I am requesting that you consider 109 and 119 to be to waive the 3 readings and pass on an emergency basis.
Mr. Wobser?
Matt, I'm glad, I guess you tried to narrow this definition a little bit. And I know we're not quite at the right legislation yet because of the split, et cetera, but while you're up there, we might as well just discuss this topic in general. I've got some issues with the small box retail, the moratorium, and then also the change. I'm trying to understand what's our issue with small box retail? What kind of a problem do they present to our community?
As I've mentioned before, they're welcome in our community. I think there's a disconnect between the industry and communities and the density and the amount of stores that they want to put into a community. So the frequency of the stores, interestingly enough, following the information about McDonald's on Facebook, the word dollar store probably appeared in 25% of the comments. So it's an item that's on the community's mind. So when looking at that, if, let's say, McDonald's withdraws their application or the project doesn't go through, my real concern was I don't want a dollar store moving into kind of our premier South End, and I don't want a Game of Skill moving into that same area. On the north side of Findlay, the abandoned Fifth Third Bank is now a Game of Skill parlor. We have 6 Game of Skill parlors, so looking at those 2 items, I wanted to address them. So specifically, different communities have different issues with dollar stores. In some communities, the dollar stores are driving out their grocery stores. The grocery stores can't compete with them. My concern with dollar stores is just the sheer number that they want to place in our community. We have 8 within the city limits, and we still receive calls all the time. I think there's 1 or 2 sites that may be looked at for dollar stores. I don't know that. But so looking at the public's feedback, looking at what other communities have done, that's why I moved forward with this.
Do you think it's been successful in the other communities? Have you talked to any of them to say, hey, did this achieve what it was that you were trying to by denying businesses to come into their community?
I did not follow up with them. I know the method works. I don't know about the second.
I've still got some serious issues with this. I guess, I don't know, something doesn't feel right about the fact that we're denying businesses. And, there's areas of town that are not very accessible to grocery stores. And people that have mobility problems, maybe this tends to suit them better. In your change to the zoning law, did you still include the population basis for the number of stores?
That is still in there.
And what was that number again?
1 for every 10,000.
So as of the last census, we would have 4?
Correct.
And we have how many now?
8.
So we're double our allotment?
Correct.
So what would we do?
So further dollar stores would have to go out of business before another one is established. And I will say, and I said this to Planning Commission and Planning and Zoning Committee, I'm least married to the population, the density. I am most adamant about moving it from being permitted within downtown C1 and C2 to strictly having it in the C2 district. That, to me, is the most important part of this legislation, is that limiting factor. The density, I honestly expected that the 1 to 10,000 is what's used by other communities. I expected the feedback to let's change it, let's roll that down to 1 to 8,000 or 1 to 6,000. I thought we'd have some discussion about that, but that never came about. So
I mean, that's where it stands. That is the least important part of this legislation, in my opinion.
Mr. Russell?
So I look at the moratorium and the actual zoning amendments as two separate issues. The moratorium is, in essence, giving us an opportunity to, and the time to evaluate and redesign the zoning amendments in the and do it with a lot of input. And I mean, personally, I would, if we would do the moratorium, I would probably table the zoning amendment changes so that planning and zoning can have further discussions about how to construct this, whether it's 8,000 or 10,000, or you restrict by zoning classification. But part of the reason that Matt brought this in is that when the McDonald's proposal came, I met with Matt and Jacob Mercer for Hancock Regional Planning, and we discussed in general, it's like, is C1 the appropriate? Is C1 appropriate for a fast food establishment? And if not, why does our code say restaurant? And so it was really a discussion about, where is C1, which is neighborhood commercial or local commercial, versus C2, and what is the appropriate construction? Where are the holes in our C1 so that it isn't doing what we think is reflective of what we hear from the community? I don't have the answers to that right now, but the moratorium gives us the opportunity. It gives the Planning and Zoning Committee and all of council the opportunity and the time to look at it in detail and do it correctly. And so we already have more games of skill chances or establishments coming in. I understand from conversations with Matt following two Tuesdays ago council meeting that they got subsequent calls for those for that type of business, looking at other places to get in. So I like having time to with my hair, when my hair isn't on fire, to make well-reasoned and well-researched changes, especially with our zoning code. And after conversation, I will recommend that we waive our statutory rules and give this its third reading. But I at this point in time, I'd like to hear what other people think.
Okay, just real quick, I think this discussion needs to be made in front of council. The rules of council dictate that we use Robert's Rules of Order. Does everybody agree with that? Based on Robert's Rules of Order, we are on a second reading and are asking for discussion. Discussion is normally done after a motion is made and seconded, and then discussion comes. I just want to, we do that often. I'm going to ask the law director I have no problem doing it, right? But we just seem to discuss under 3 readings, and then when the third reading comes, So I was going to bring that up under new business, but just understand. Okay, before we go, there's a motion, but Ms. Frishy asked to discuss, and everybody else has been able to. She should be able to also.
So, listening to Jeff's lengthy discussion, I think it's not me this time. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said how many small box dollar stores do we have? We have 8. Our economy, our community dictates that. They're obviously successful, and they are successful C1 or C2. I think when we are trying to control something, we should let the community control that based off of where they shop and what they do. When Matt said it's kind of driving other businesses out, that's the way the cookie crumbles, right? And then for me, for a moratorium, I know Grant says, well, I think we should pass this so we can discuss it. We can discuss this without a moratorium. I look at a moratorium being put in place of a sense of emergency. I don't see an emergency for small box. I see, let's have a discussion and figure that out, but I don't think we should stop businesses from doing their process while we're having a discussion on small box. Now, on games of skill, and that's kind of where I was at the last meeting, you know, trying to say maybe we should split this, because I don't think it's our job to dictate small box business. And I think there is a need for them in a C1 area, because it is for those folks who have mobility issues and stuff that don't drive or don't get far out of their neighborhood to be able to have something to get their needs from.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Stashak? Point of order. I don't know what the point of order would be.
Excuse me, Matt. Law director and I are talking, and I'll defer to him if you folks have questions, but your rules actually say that no proposed legislation regarding zoning issues shall be presented to this council unless they have gone through city planning and planning and zoning committee apparently first. I don't know if that happened or not. I'd like to get that on the record from a liability standpoint, since we're talking about corporations that aren't happy when they get stopped from doing something that's legal currently under the current rules. And that's what the law director and I are discussing.
I think they did. We have our committee reports.
This applies before the legislation comes.
Okay, well, so obviously we've got a couple issues based on the discussion that, but I'm sorry, Mr. Russell, you made a motion previously to suspend the rules, or it was a recommendation that we did?
He's holding that.
Okay. Are there any more questions for Mr. Cordonier? Thank you. Mr. Russell?
Move that statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Can I ask a question? Are we talking about the moratorium?
Yes.
We're talking,
It's split now, so.
we're talking about the ordinance. And now I've lost my spot here.
Well, I've lost my spot too.
Yeah.
Tell me what we're talking about.
Small box moratorium.
Stay with us. Okay.
This is to suspend.
6-month moratorium, I got you. I'm in favor of it. Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Nay.
3 nays.
So 7-3, what's that do? Suspension, 7-3? I can tell you here in a second. No, it's 7-3. The rules of council are not suspended.
Correct. Second reading for ordinance 2022-110. An ordinance repealing sections 1135.03, 1137.071, 1143.03, and 1174 of the current zoning code, and in its place enacting the same amended sections of the codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Mr. Russell.
Move to table ordinance 2022-110.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of tabling the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Nay.
3 nays again.
It is
Not tabled.
not tabled.
First-
Point of order. Motion to table is just a simple majority.
Simple majority.
Yep, you're right. 7-3, the ordinance is tabled.
First reading for ordinance 2022-111. An ordinance authorizing the auditor to make payroll deductions for those employees who have elected to enroll in the health savings account plan and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-112. An ordinance amending 3 sections of codified ordinance number 2022-081 as amended, known as the salary ordinance of the city of Findlay, Ohio, and repealing all other parts of ordinances in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-113. An ordinance approving the request of the administrative judge of the municipal court of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to grant an additional 15% salary increase for the clerk of municipal court position, which would exceed the allotted 8% of current codified ordinance number 2022-81 as amended of the city of Findlay, Ohio, known as the salary ordinance, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-114. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract or contracts with Tuttle Construction Incorporated for the design services phase of the city of Findlay, Ohio Public Works Department building, also known as Traffic Fabrication Shop, project number 319125500, located on Corey Street, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-115. An ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
As we commonly do when transferring just from one fund from another, especially in this type of situation, I move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-115 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Rules of council been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-115. Ordinance 2022-115.
Mr. Hellman.
Move for approval of ordinance 2022-115.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-116. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for construction of a burn building to be located north of the Strick Center, as well as the installation of a portion of the site pavement, project number 3199490, appropriating funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
For the same reasons as the previous ordinance, I move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-116 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. I already got Mr. Yep. That's a suspension.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-116, ordinance 2022-116.
Mr. Palmer.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-116.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-117, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell.
For the reasons stated for the previous two, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-117 Be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
That was suspension.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-117, ordinance 2022-117.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2022-117.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion. Ms. Frishy?
It says sewer fund supplier reimbursement. Somebody explain what this ordinance is for me.
Popular tonight, I guess, but so I'll give you a long story short on this. So we had last year a clarifier arm got twisted up because the motor did not shut off, so we had to get a new clarifier arm. OVO or whatever sent us a new arm. We hired Peterson Construction to install that. Is supposedly come back per our specs. They go to put it in, it could not fit or anything. And we told this supplier, hey, you got to cover the extra cost for Peterson. So this is just moving money so we can pay them.
You did right about it. I thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-118, an ordinance vacating a portion of alley between West McPherson Avenue and Lake Cascades Parkway, formerly Vance Avenue, east of Douglas Parkway, abutting the Sherman Addition, Block G, and in lots number 16815 through 16822, hereinafter referred to as the 119 West McPherson Avenue vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio. First reading for ordinance 2022-119, an ordinance authorizing the establishment of a 6-month moratorium on the establishment of any skill-based amusement businesses in order for the city of Findlay, Ohio to consider incorporating the proposed additions into the current zoning code as outlined below before enacting them as part of the codified ordinances of the city of Findlay, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-119 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
The rules of council are suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-119, ordinance 2022-119.
Mr.
Adoption
Russell.
move for adoption of ordinance 2022-119.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
Don, can you just, there you are. Can you just give clarification on the concern that the auditor had? Are we allowed to pass this without it first going through further than what we did through committee? So since it since the legislation, I guess since it's split out, does it matter? Since it was split, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Baumann.
I guess that's what I was going to say, is that because this is a new piece of legislation on its first reading and it came from P&Z and our planning commission, we're good, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-120, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a guaranteed maximum price phase amendment number 3, GMP 3, with Klaus Construction Corporation for the site utility concrete and final build-out, including finishes and MEP phases of the Strict Center project, and declaring an emergency. No. Wait, yeah, that is the last one.
Old business. Ms. Frischie?
On this last ordinance, shouldn't we have the price for the maximum for GMP3 somewhere listed in here?
Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, we can add it. I don't have a problem with that.
So can I make a motion to amend that for the next meeting, or you're gonna take care of it? Okay.
Other old business. I'm sorry, other old business. Mr. Wobser.
The moratorium on the small box. The concern there is the concern there that somebody's going to put, or the folks that now own or are looking to own the property on that we've been discussing, I want to say McPherson and South Main Street, is that they're going to come back and put a small box on that piece of property. Is that why we were asking for the moratorium? Mr. Baumann, you voted.
I believe that, because I mean, that's the fear, is that if we turn down the McDonald's, it's going to turn into something else that the community doesn't want as equally as a McDonald's on that corner. At least in my view, that's my understanding.
Matt. Sorry, it's not, I'm sorry. Not
I'll
out of
do my
rules.
duty. Matt, would you like to speak now?
I would say that's one of the items that started the ball rolling. In general, I requested the moratorium to allow us time to craft an ordinance. What I didn't want to have kind of discussion and then we get people coming in. So I wanted to be able to have the discussion, come up with an ordinance that we like, and then pass the ordinance without the pressure of feeling rushed. So the McPherson site is just a small part of the moratorium.
Mr. Wobser?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I was wondering, I think that's a valid reason for the moratorium, actually for that specific piece of property, not the McPherson piece, but the old Fifth Third Bank property. I guess I'd be interested to hear if any of the councilmen who voted against the, I can't remember, the suspension, if they would be willing to change their vote, just so that we would have this 6 months to look at redoing the, I'm still not in favor overall of the zoning change at this point, Matt, but I think given that specific piece of property and the public outcry that we have had about that property, in my mind warrants this moratorium. So I was wondering if anybody that voted against that would be willing to change their mind.
No.
I'd make a motion to reconsider 109 as amended.
Second, Mr. Russell. Discussion.
Do we vote on the motion to reconsider?
Okay. All those in favor of I'm sorry, there is no discussion based on that motion. All those in favor of reconsidering ordinance 119, right?
As amended.
119? Oh, I'm sorry, 109. I just want to get the right one on record. As amended, right? Say aye if your name is called, those opposed nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Nay.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Nay.
Sorry, I'm trying to write this as quick as I can. Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Baumann.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Nay.
Mr. Niemeyer? Okay, so I have one, two,
The motion
three,
to
four, five.
reconsider is
Split.
not approved.
Oh, it's now your vote. It's a 5-5.
Would it, is it a simple majority? Does that necessarily matter on the? I don't know, I'm asking.
Yeah.
For a reconsider, is it a simple majority or?
Reconsideration, yeah, it's tied.
I can't hear you.
It's tied, right? Correct.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but I would vote in the case of.
yeah, you have both.
But if I vote yea or
But it
nay,
doesn't-
does it make any
It
difference?
still doesn't make a difference because
Well, I'll vote aye. So it's 6-5. And that's not enough to reconsider?
It's a motion to reconsider. It's simple majority, isn't it?
I'm asking the lawyer, not you, Mr. Russell, I'm sorry.
Is this just to reconsider suspending the rules?
Let's,
have the readings? Is that
I understand that. I'm looking at our counsel and who handles that for us, and I will confer to his answer.
Simple majority, you had a tie vote. So, and he breaks.
Doesn't happen.
Well, I guess you have to be able to break the tie, so it's gotta be a 6-5 then. It's gotta be.
So you're saying this? I'm sorry. So I'm clear, and everybody else is, and a vote of 6-5,
Right.
ayes in the majority, it is reconsidered.
Right.
Okay, so that is, so 6-5, it is reconsidered. Mr. Russell?
Question, Don, you had mentioned that when asked about 119, that was a valid piece of legislation because it was getting its first reading. Is 109 also valid because it is not amending the zoning code, but is simply placing a moratorium? It's just regular legislation that was introduced. It was then sent to committee and City Planning Commission for their opinion. But it's not really amending our zoning code. It's simply stating that there's a moratorium on this particular type of business. So if it's, I appreciate Jim bringing up the zoning code concern, and that would change the zoning code language that got introduced first and is now tabled. But I'm wondering if that applies to 109.
That was the 6-month moratorium, right?
Yes, sir.
Small box.
Yes, sir.
You have, Denise, do you have the vote on that?
On one,
109.
Motion to suspend for 7-3, so.
yeah, 7-3. Read again.
Suspend the rules.
That's not all. So is that a three-quarter majority?
7-3 was not a three-quarter majority, so the motion to suspend the rules was not approved.
Yes, but the question was raised by the auditor that this is a zoning amendment and therefore it must start in committee. But it is not a zoning amendment. It is regular ordinance. It doesn't say amend our zoning code. And therefore, my simple question is, if it would be passed, would it be valid? Because it is, I mean, I understand if Don says this is a zoning code, then we don't have a conversation about its suspension.
I don't have an opinion, but I prefer.
It's a zoning issue, obviously, but I don't know if I've ever seen that.
But isn't it changing the zoning basically during that 6 months? I mean, because you're stopping it. You're basically doing what they want to pass eventually.
So, just so I understand your question, and so we can clarify this, is this amendment a zoning amendment or not a zoning amendment? That's just to simplify your question.
Correct, because
Okay.
it does not state in the amendment that it is changing the zoning code of our corporation. It is simply, nowhere does it refer to our zoning code.
Right.
It's simply saying, it's simply an amendment saying what it says, but it does not amend the zoning code, therefore, it isn't germane to the reason why we tabled the actual zoning amendment that does amend the zoning code.
Hang on just a second.
We
Let's
just
give
passed
Don some
119,
time to
which was
digest.
the moratorium on.
Yeah, we did 19.
Yeah, but I think this is different, is why we separated them, is because we're impacting business. No, they're both.
Well, Don ponders a decision to give an answer. Mr. Wobser, you had something you wanted to say?
The Planning and Zoning Committee approved the small box moratorium. They approved both moratoriums in their committee report. So I mean, that meets the standard, I believe, that we were just discussing. It was approved by Planning and Zoning, so therefore, if it's approved by them, we should be able to vote on it,
Ms. Warnicki?
which I believe is the issue.
I was just wondering if we could have some discussion, which is what Jeff originally asked, from the 3 people who voted nay, because if they aren't inclined to change their vote, we're wasting a lot of time answering the other question. Sorry.
Mr. Baum? I'm sorry. Was that a question for Jeff, or was that a comment? I'm sorry.
No comment, I guess.
Okay, Mr. Baumann? You good? Mr. Palmer?
I will not be changing my vote.
Mr. Wobser?
Understand, appreciate that, Mr. Palmer. I guess I'd like to have a little bit of explanation as to why. And is there a period of time that would be palatable to you versus the 6 months?
I don't agree with doing the moratorium for the small box retail stores. I'm on board with the games of chance. I just think the retail stores, I don't see what the big deal is in letting them be where they are right now. So
Would you approve a small box retail store to go on the Fifth Third property on South Main Street?
I'm going to ask that's
I
his
mean, that's
decision to
speculation
make.
because, I mean, we don't have that
Yeah.
offer up in front of us.
Yeah, there's no reason to put him in front of a bus or anything.
I'd
on
rather
this
see what
issue.
comes, I'd rather see
Mr.
what comes
Baumann?
forward.
I guess to your point, Mr. Wobser, yes, we do have phone calls for that property from small box stores and games of skill. So to the answer to your question, yes, there is interest in that property. So, I mean, I guess I guess I don't understand the aversion. And this point was made in committee. So for new construction of say a dollar store, they would have already heard about that by now. Okay? So secondly, I guess someone would have said something. So we're not impeding business in any way. We're just pausing so we can have a conversation.
Ms. Frisching?
So I will not be changing my vote. You asked the question about McDonald's because I think it's interesting that it came up that that's part of the reason that this is being discussed, which is the first time I have heard that. My answer to you on that, whether it's McDonald's, a dollar store, a restaurant, Dietz's, Wilson's moving down the street, it's going to go through a site plan review. They're going to look at traffic. They're going to look at all the pieces of all the concerns that we're hearing. And if it doesn't fit for those reasons, it won't get approved. Now, I'm glad we took care of games of skill not being on the corner of South Main Street like we have on the corner of North Main Street, right? Because those are transient businesses that are not an asset to our community. But it's not our job to dictate what businesses for C1 retail that meet the definition go in there, and to change the whole thing just because of that corner, I think that's pretty drastic, because we have other areas of town that a C1 is appropriate and people want that and they appreciate it for the reasons that you said, for people that have disabilities and can't travel as easily to a C2 area, which is Tiffin Avenue, Trenton Avenue. So if you're wanting to focus just on South Main, I think that's not being very open-minded on the entire city as a whole when we're looking at C1 versus C2. So for me, the community dictates what we want in our community by shopping there and keeping it in business. And if it is putting bigger retail out of business because people use it, well, then there's a need for it in C1. Maybe not on that corner. Maybe the traffic doesn't allow for it. Maybe there's a fire safety concern. Maybe there's an EMS concern. Those are all going to come out on no matter what's going in on that location. But I'm glad it's not going to be a game of skill.
Mr. Wobser.
Oh, Mr. Baum.
Well, he put his hand down. I wasn't sure. Mr. Baum.
Yeah, I guess I would say that's false. Because Dr. Bateson could tomorrow say, hey, I'm putting this facility up for sale. And if we talk about like the old Family Dollar locations, anyone can buy that property and put whatever they want in there. So I think that's false. Case in point, the Fifth Third on North Main Street. So we're focusing on South Main Street because, well, that's what's available. It's just, kicking the can down the road for something even more less desirable.
Mr. Wobser.
I defer to Councilman
Mr.
Niemeyer.
Niemeyer.
Well, I was a third nay vote, and I'm going to stay nay. Just like I said last meeting, it's too much government. We're picking on certain businesses. What happens if if a liquor license goes in there, tobacco license, are we going to say no? Because we got Speedway selling them. We got Kroger across the street selling it, Southside 6, and oh my gosh, we can only have so many per 10,000 people? What happened to the free enterprise system? You live in America till you come to Hancock County?
All right. Mr. Rasmussen, did you come up with a
Yes.
opinion?
Yes.
Or solution, or whatever you want to call
It
it?
hurts me. I think Grant's right. Hurts all of us.
A live discussion. Okay, Mr. Wobser.
I appreciate what Councilman Frischie and Councilman Niemeyer said, but Councilman Baumann is correct. A small box store could go in there tomorrow in that piece of property, and you could not stop it because it meets a C1 zone. So in your own language, you would have to say, no, you can't go in there because of something that, just because you don't like that business, if it met all the other criteria. So my point in all of this is just simply saying, let's take 6 months. Let's make sure that we're doing the right thing, that we've got these new type of retail stores zoned correctly, and that they end up in the right places in town. We're not telling people that they can't build them. We're just putting them in an area of town that they're more accessible.
Mr. Harrington?
Well, we haven't officially voted. Okay. I'm, just a second here, I'm trying to figure out where we are on the map here.
Oh, there's more.
Okay, Mr. Russell.
The reason I asked Don the question about 109 is because before 119 was voted on, the question was asked, was this legal? And then 119, which restricts a specific type of business, was passed, was suspended on a unanimous vote, a 10-0 vote, where 109, and in part of the conversations I've heard, people have said, we are not here to pick winners, yet with 119, we picked winners and said, we will not allow games of skill for 6 months while we consider games of skill where they should be in the city, but the same, that same philosophy wasn't followed for, in 109 for a small box retailer. Mr. Palmer made a statement that he thinks it's not appropriate for small box retailer, but was appropriate for games of skill. And I appreciate that he differentiates between the two and votes his conscience, but to state that you have a blanket aversion to restricting business, well, that is what zoning is. That's why we have a zoning amendment about adult bookstores and where they can be located. That's why we have zoning, so that you cannot put a gas station next to your house, and that is something that protects neighborhoods' values. So I think that the restriction of business argument is on shaky legs when you're trying to talk about zoning per se, but seeing as though that the 3 votes against suspension remain firm for however suspect the reasons might be for the nay votes, I'm not going to bring it up for reconsideration because it wouldn't change the outcome.
I'm sorry. Hang on. Before you say that, is there a motion and a second to bring it up right on the table right now? To reconsider.
We already did that.
Okay. All right. And the vote. Okay. All right. So the motion to reconsider is defeated.
No, you passed it 6-5, and we've discussed it.
Oh. Right. All right.
The motion to reconsider.
I'm everything except not confused. Mr. Russell, please explain exactly what happened.
Did I hear you say new business?
I want to.
Please do, and I'll get some
Okay,
new business.
under new business, I'm going to bring up my recent comment, and I will research this and get back to you about Robert's Rules of Order. The discussion when a ordinance or resolution is given a reading, the discussion is when an ordinance or resolution is motioned and seconded and then discussed. If discussion, and this is my opinion, and I will confirm or change this opinion, would be that any discussion on anything on an ordinance should be brought up in either old or new business based on Robert's Rules of Order. And per our council rules, that's what we follow. So I will let you know based on my research, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Other new business. Mr. Wobser.
I would say that on that topic, Mr. President, and I agree on Robert's Rules of Orders, but this is our meeting, and therefore we can format it however we choose. We just need to put it into council's rules. The concern that I've got, and I think the reason that this discussion happens without a motion on the table, is because once you have a motion to suspend, which is generally the case, that no discussion can be had after that. And so that really, at times, concerns when you're trying to get items straight and get the situation straightened out. So I would suggest that if you come back with that we look at potentially adding that to council's rules.
Yep, I understand. But current rules of council is again, it's your meeting. You change the rules, I'll follow the rules. That's all I'm doing. Mr. Russell.
To no one's surprise, there is going to be a planning and zoning meeting on November 10th at noon. It will be here in council chambers. It will be live streamed on YouTube. Mayor, if you could help us make sure that happens. And I kind of think that actually from here on out, I'll probably have all planning and zoning meetings here and live stream so that any public who wants to watch is given the opportunity, and it also serves as a great way to have a permanent record for what was discussed. So, but November 10th at noon, here, council chambers live streamed on YouTube, planning and zoning.
Mr. Greeno.
Yes, I'd like to schedule a water and sewer meeting for October the 27th at 5 PM. This will be an update on the CSO long-term control plan. Third floor conference room.
Mr. Palmer.
I'm calling a street, sidewalks, and parking committee meeting for next Monday at 5 o'clock, third floor conference room if it's available.
Mayor, bring us home.
Calling a meeting, and I promise to be quick. Good discussion. I look forward to participating in that as we look. I know those of you that have participated in strategic planning, one of the things we heard loud and clear is how do we maintain the small city character of our community. The zoning code and the land use plan are those specific tools that we're able to utilize to do that. So I think that having discussion around these types of items is very beneficial. Just 3 quick items. AEP will be flipping the traffic flow on Friday morning, very early, so just be aware that they're making progress, they're on schedule, and that intersection will be reconfigured slightly, so please be aware. The Strict Center, thank you for continuing to work with us. Obviously, this is a large project and different than normal, but it's exciting to finally see it moving along. It obviously was delayed during COVID, and I know folks are excited to get that up and running, so appreciate your support on that. And finally, as you saw in the press and as we communicated to you via email, the city of Findlay did receive an ISO classification rating improvement from an ISO class 3 to an ISO class 2 effective January 1st, 2023. I just want to give a huge shout out to our dispatch team, water distribution, and fire department. They have been working over the last couple of years to identify what they needed to do to improve, putting those operations into place, making the systems improvements necessary, and it paid off. So we're excited to continue to work to improve that for an eventual ISO class 1, but just want to give them some great kudos and thank you all for the support that you've provided to the administration and the departments in being able to implement those changes to achieve it. With that, any questions for me, or we're all ready to go home and go to bed? All right, thank you all for your time.
Congratulations.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Baumann, second. Mr. Russell, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Yes.
Nay.
Yep.